The room was already settling into that second phase of grief, the one where voices soften and people start arranging themselves into smaller, safer circles. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. No speeches, no raised hands, just the quiet choreography of a family deciding where everyone stood. Marissa Cole is a certified public accountant. She spent most of her adult life keeping her tone level, her face neutral, her reactions measured. That's why this moment matters. Because even the most controlled people feel it when belonging starts to slip. This is where it became hers to tell. I didn't cry at the service. I kept waiting for it. But my body didn't cooperate. Sharon stood at the front with Dylan, her hand resting on his arm like she was anchoring him there. People approached them first. They always did. The reception was held in a bright room that smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner, round tables, white tablecloths, my father's photo near the entrance, smiling the way he did when he thought no one was watching. I stayed near the back, pretending to read sympathy cards I'd already read once. Every so often someone touched my elbow, said my name softly, then drifted toward my mother and brother. I heard Dylan before I saw him. "We'll need to move quickly," he was saying, calm voice, responsible tone. Sharon answered just as quietly, "It's what makes sense." I stepped closer, staying behind one of the columns. My name floated out next. "Marissa's independent," Sharon said. "She always has been," Dylan added. "She'll understand. Dad left complications." Complications. Like it was a footnote. Aunt Maureen murmured something sympathetic. I didn't hear the words. I heard the rhythm. The same explanation, repeated table to table. I stepped out from behind the column. Sharon noticed me immediately. Her smile didn't falter, but it didn't reach her eyes either. "You doing okay?" she asked. "I heard you talking about the house." Dylan's shoulders stiffened for half a second before he smoothed it out. "We're just keeping people informed." "Informed about what?" Sharon's voice lowered. "Not here." I looked at both of them. "You're telling people it's being sold." Dylan held my gaze. "We're considering options." The words landed clean, practiced, like they'd already agreed on them. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that used to show up when I was a teenager and realized decisions had already been made without me. "This is Dad's house," I said. Sharon nodded. "Exactly." Something about the way she said it made the room feel smaller. I didn't argue, not because I agreed, because I could feel the eyes around us, the way conversations slowed just enough to listen without appearing to listen. "Later," Sharon said again, firmer now. "We'll talk later." I nodded once and turned away, past the guest book, past the framed photo, past the neat stack of programs that suddenly felt heavier than paper should. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I stood there for a moment before getting into my car, hands still shaking just enough to notice. I didn't know yet that this was the first time they'd said it out loud. I just knew the script had changed, and no one had bothered to hand me a copy. The driveway was wet when I pulled in, dark patches spreading under my tires. The house looked the same from the street. White siding, blue shutters, porch light still on in the middle of the afternoon. Like my dad had stepped out for a minute and forgotten. Dylan's car was already there, parked crooked near the garage. I sat with my hands on the steering wheel longer than I meant to. The radio was off. The silence felt louder than any sermon. When I walked in, the air smelled like furniture polish and old carpet. Sharon's voice carried from the kitchen. "No, I'm handling it." She was telling someone on the phone. "Everything's under control." She turned when she saw me and ended the call fast. "You're back already." I needed to grab a few things. Dylan came in behind her, holding a bottled water he'd probably pulled from the fridge without asking. He looked fine, clean, put together. The kind of fine that felt like a decision. "Your room's upstairs," he said. "Just so you know, some of my stuff's in there. Temporary." I nodded and walked past them. The stairs creaked the same way they always had. third step from the bottom. The hallway smelled like dust and fabric softener, like someone had tried to make grief smell normal. My bedroom door stuck when I pushed it open. My bed was gone. The dresser was gone. In the middle of the room were stacked suitcases, shoe boxes, garment bags, and a television still wrapped in plastic. The closet door was open, full of clothes on matching hangers. It looked like a storage unit that happened to have pale blue walls. I stood in the doorway, my overnight bag hanging from my hand like I'd forgotten I was holding it. Downstairs. Sharon called up. "Dinner will be simple. Don't expect anything fancy." "I'm not hungry," I called back, even though my stomach made a quiet complaint. Dylan's voice floated up. "You should eat. Big week. Big week. Like we were planning a vacation." I set my bag down in the guest room instead. The bedspread was tucked tight. The pillows were arranged like no one actually slept there. When I went back downstairs, Sharon was wiping the counter, even though it was already clean. She kept her eyes on the surface like it needed her full attention. "We're meeting with Arthur on Thursday," she said, "to go over everything." Everything didn't mean my dad's tools in the basement or his jacket still hanging by the back door. It meant the house. It always meant the house. Dylan leaned against the fridge. "It'll be quick. Just formalities." I looked at Sharon. "You're planning to sell it." Her hand paused on the counter. "We're considering options." "That's what you told people today." She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. "I'm not staying in this house alone," she said. "It's too much. Too many memories." Dylan nodded like he'd rehearsed the supportive son role. "Mom needs a fresh start." I tried to keep my voice steady. "You both decided that without talking to me." Sharon's eyes finally lifted to mine. "You moved out years ago. Marissa, you built your own life. You told me to build my own life." Her expression tightened. "Don't do this tonight." Dylan gave me a look that was almost impatient. "This isn't about old stuff." I stared at him for a beat. His hands weren't steady. Not shaking, exactly. Just restless. Fingers tapping the side of the fridge. A tiny tell. "It's always about old stuff," I said quietly. No one answered that. Later. I lay in the guest room listening to the ceiling fan hum unevenly. My phone sat on the nightstand. No missed calls, no texts. The house was full of people, and I still felt alone in it. Down the hall, I heard Dylan's door open and close. A soft thud like a suitcase being moved. "Temporary," he'd said. Nothing about it felt temporary. I woke up early because my body doesn't sleep when there's unfinished tension in the air. The house was quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator cycle on and the faint click of the heater. In the kitchen, I poured coffee into my dad's old mug without thinking. The handle was chipped. Sharon had tried to throw it out once, and he'd taken it out of the trash like it mattered. Dylan walked in wearing sweatpants and an old hoodie, hair damp like he'd just showered. For a second, he looked like the version of him I used to know. Then his phone buzzed and his whole posture changed. He picked it up fast, read something. His jaw tightened. Then he typed a reply with his thumbs moving too quickly. "You sleep okay?" he asked, casual, like his hands weren't doing that. "Fine." He opened the fridge, stared into it, then pulled out orange juice and drank from the carton. "You always drink straight from it," I said, mostly because I needed the room to feel normal for a second. He gave a short laugh. "You always hated that." Sharon entered a moment later, already dressed, pearls in place like armor. She moved straight to the counter and started straightening mail that didn't need straightening. "Thursday," she said. "You need to be practical." "I'm a certified public accountant," I answered. "Practical is kind of my thing." She didn't smile. "Not that kind of practical." Dylan set the orange juice down a little too hard. "Let's keep it calm." Sharon's eyes stayed on the envelopes. "This isn't about feelings. It's about responsibility." I took a sip of coffee. Too hot. Whose responsibility? Her mouth pressed thin. "Your brother has had setbacks." Dylan's head snapped up. Don't make it sound like I'm some mess. Sharon kept going like he hadn't spoken. He needs support. He stayed. He helped. He's here. I held the mug with both hands to keep them from shaking. He's here because he doesn't have anywhere else to be. Dylan's face flushed. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you've been out of work. I said. I know your stuff is filling my room. Sharon's eyes lifted. Sharp. It's not your room anymore. The words landed clean and certain, like she'd been waiting to say them. I stared at her. Dad was still alive when my bed disappeared. Sharon waved a hand like that was a minor detail. He wasn't using that room. Dylan stepped in, voice low. Marissa, stop. We're all dealing with Dad being gone. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, like the grief was trying to push through and couldn't find a clean way out. You're right, I said. He's gone. Sharon nodded, relieved. Thank you. But the relief didn't last. Dylan's phone buzzed again. This time he didn't even try to hide it. He glanced at the screen and his foot started bouncing under the table. Fast and uneven. Sharon noticed and her face changed. Just a flicker. Worry. Then she smoothed it away. You have to sign on Thursday. She said to me, quieter now. It'll make everything easier. I haven't seen anything I'm supposed to sign. You will. Dylan cut in. Just don't make it a thing. I set my mug down carefully. You already made it a thing when you started telling people I don't need the house. Sharon's voice sharpened. You don't? I stood there for a second, breathing through the pressure in my chest, trying to keep my face neutral the way I do in client meetings. Then I reached for my keys. I'm going out, I said. Sharon didn't look up. Don't be late. Dylan watched me like he wanted to say something else, something softer, but he didn't. Outside, the air was cold enough to wake me up fully. I sat in my car with the door still open, letting it hit my face. This house had always taught me the same lesson. Love was conditional. Space was borrowed. If you wanted a seat at the table, you had to accept the rules. I didn't know yet that Thursday was going to change the rules. I just knew they were trying to lock me into something before I could see the whole page. Arthur Levin's office sat above a dry cleaner and a nail salon, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were already stressed. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. 3 chairs, a low table, old magazines no one touched. Sharon checked her watch twice. Dylan paced, stopped, paced again. His phone stayed in his hand the whole time. Arthur came out, nodded once, and led us into the conference room. It felt too small once we all sat down. Sharon took the seat closest to him. Dylan dropped into the chair beside her, jacket folded neatly over the back. I chose the chair across from them. Arthur set a folder on the table. This meeting is informational, he said. No transfers happened today. Dylan leaned forward. We just want to move quickly, Sharon added. Cleanly. Arthur opened the folder. Before we start, I need to clarify expectations. Dylan slid a single page toward me. This helps everyone. The title was printed in bold, Voluntary Disclaimer of Interest. Sharon's hand hovered near the paper. It's just to avoid confusion later. I didn't touch it. You want me to give up something you already told people you're selling? Dylan smiled. Thin. We're lining things up. Arthur's pen paused. Selling requires authority. We have a buyer, Dylan said. They've already put money down. Arthur looked up. How much? 75,000. The room went still. Arthur leaned back slightly. There is no executed sales contract for this property. Dylan's jaw tightened. It's a memorandum, non-binding. Under whose name? Arthur asked. Dylan hesitated. Just long enough. Mine. Sharon turned toward him. What did you do? Arthur's voice stayed even. You accepted funds for a property you do not own. It was temporary. Dylan snapped. A bridge. A bridge to what? Arthur asked. No one answered. Arthur closed the folder. Before anything proceeds, ownership needs to be addressed. Sharon straightened. Edwin owned the house. He lived in it. Arthur said, "That's not the same thing." I felt my stomach drop. Not panic. Recognition. Arthur slid another folder forward. Thicker. Older. This property was transferred into a limited liability company in 2012. Sharon frowned. For protection? Yes, Arthur said. From creditors. Dylan leaned in. Then Mom controls it. She signed. Arthur shook his head once. She signed consent for formation, not the operating agreement. Sharon's voice sharpened. That doesn't make sense. Arthur turned the page. The operating agreement names a single managing member. The room felt smaller. Arthur looked at me. That member is Marissa Cole. The words hung there, heavy and precise. Sharon stared at Arthur. That's not possible. Dylan laughed, short and sharp. She didn't even live here. Arthur slid the document closer. My name was printed cleanly at the top. The agreement was executed in 2012. He said, notarized, filed annually. I felt heat rise in my face. I've signed those filings, I said slowly. Every year. Dylan snapped his head toward me. I signed because my dad told me it was part of his retirement structure. I continued. I trusted him. I never looked closely at the entity name. Arthur nodded once. That aligns with the record. Sharon's voice dropped. You lied to me. I didn't. Arthur replied. The property was Edwin's separate inheritance. In 2012, you signed a quitclaim deed transferring your interest into the company to shield it from Dylan's creditors. Sharon went still. I did that for my son. And that decision is why your claim ended there, Arthur said. Dylan shoved his chair back slightly. This is fraud. Arthur didn't flinch. Pamela Cross was present. Pamela, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke for the first time. Every year. Fees paid, filings current. Sharon turned toward her. You knew? Pamela nodded. Yes. Dylan's voice cracked. So I'm cut out. No, Arthur said. You were limited. He flipped to another page. Edwin left you his vehicle. Dylan blinked. What vehicle? A 2018 Honda Accord. Clear title. Dylan stared at the table. Then he laughed. Not amused, panicked. The car, he said. You're giving me a car while people are waiting for me outside with a contract I can't fulfill. His hands started shaking. Not subtle now. Arthur met his eyes. You accepted $75,000 under a promise you couldn't guarantee? Your exposure is personal. Sharon pressed a hand to her chest. How much? Dylan swallowed. $415,000. Silence. Sharon looked at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. You did this. I tried to fix it, he said. I needed time. Arthur closed the folder. That time doesn't come from coercing Marissa. I sat back, heart pounding. Letter now placed gently in front of me. My father's handwriting stared up at me. Careful. Uneven. He wrote that he waited because he didn't want to hand me a burden before I was protected, that he watched me build my life quietly and didn't want to make me a target too early. I folded the letter with shaking hands. The room didn't feel explosive. It felt finished. No one spoke for a while. Dylan stood, then sat back down. Like his legs didn't trust him. His breathing was shallow now, uneven. This isn't over, he said, voice unsteady. Arthur looked at him calmly. It is for today. Dylan's eyes flicked toward the door, toward the hallway, toward whatever he thought might be waiting outside. Sharon stayed seated. Her shoulders had slumped. The pearls at her throat looked heavier now. I gave up my rights for him, she said quietly. Arthur nodded. You did. She turned toward me. You're going to throw me out. I shook my head. I'm not doing anything today. Dylan laughed again. Hollow. Must be nice. Arthur gathered the folders into neat stacks. No further action will be taken without Marissa's consent. Dylan slammed his hand on the table. You don't get it. They're not patient people. Arthur's voice stayed level. Then you should have been more careful. Dylan grabbed his jacket. His hands shook so badly he dropped it once before catching it. This house ruined me, he said, not looking at anyone. I watched him walk out, shoulders tight, steps fast. For the first time, the bravado was gone completely. The door closed. Sharon didn't follow. She sat there, staring at the table like it had betrayed her. He was supposed to be safe, she whispered. I stood slowly. He made his own choices. She looked up at me then. Really looked. So did you. I nodded. I did. Arthur rose. We're done here. Outside. The sky was gray and low. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the cold air, feeling the weight of the past 12 years finally settle into something solid. Not victory. Clarity. Arthur finished gathering his files and left us alone in the conference room. The door closed softly, like it didn't want to interrupt whatever was breaking apart inside. Sharon stayed seated. She kept smoothing the fabric of her skirt, over and over, like repetition might undo what had just been said. I didn't know, she said finally. Her voice wasn't sharp now. It was thin. About the paperwork. About the quitclaim. I thought I was protecting this family. Lillian, who had been quiet the entire meeting, shifted her cane and leaned forward. You were protecting Dylan, she said. Not the family. Sharon looked at her. You knew. I knew Edwin was building something. Lillian replied. I knew he was trying to keep Marissa safe in the only way he knew how. She paused, and I supported him. Sharon's mouth tightened. You let this happen. Lillian's gaze didn't waver. I waited to see if you would choose differently. The room went still. That sentence landed heavier than anything Arthur had said. I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders were until they started to ache. I leaned back in my chair and let myself breathe for the first time in days. I didn't plan this, I said quietly. I found out because you pushed. Sharon nodded once. Not agreement. Acceptance. Lillian reached across the table and rested her hand over mine. You don't have to explain yourself, she said. You've done enough. Sharon stood slowly. I need time. That makes sense, I said. She hesitated, then picked up her purse. At the door. She stopped. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to, I answered. Not today. She left without another word. Lillian stayed seated. She studied my face the way she used to when I was a kid, like she was checking if I was really all right. He loved you quietly, she said. That doesn't make it smaller. I swallowed. I know. When we stood to leave, the hallway outside felt brighter somehow. Not lighter, just clearer. For the first time, I wasn't carrying everyone else's fear out with me. A week later, Arthur called to confirm the final details. Dylan had collected the Honda. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't argued. According to Arthur, he barely spoke. Sharon moved into the guest room permanently. We passed each other carefully in the mornings, polite, distant. She didn't bring up the house again. Dylan came once, late at night, to get the rest of his things. I stayed upstairs while he packed. I heard drawers open and close, boxes dragged across the floor. At one point, his breathing sounded uneven, like he'd sat down hard on the bed. When he reached the front door, he paused. You always land on your feet, he said without turning around. I didn't answer right away. I learned how. I said finally. The door closed behind him. The following week, I started clearing the room. It took days. Clothes, shoes, things he'd never unpacked because he never planned to stay. By the third day, my arms ached and my back was tight, but the space started to feel different. When everything was gone, I patched the nail holes and sanded the walls. The old blue paint came off in flakes. I primed, waited, painted again, sage green. It dried slowly. I slept with the window open, breathing in cold air and quiet. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt neutral, like it was waiting. The first night I slept in the room again. The house made its usual sounds, pipes shifting, floorboards settling, nothing unfamiliar. I sat on the edge of the bed and read my father's letter one more time, not for answers, just for company. He wrote about patience, about timing, about not mistaking silence for absence. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer. Sharon knocked once before opening the door. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," she said, "just until I figure things out." I nodded. "Okay." She hesitated. "I never meant to lose you." "I know," I said, and I did. After she left, I walked through the house alone, the kitchen, the living room, the porch light, still on out of habit. I turned it off. Marissa Cole didn't inherit a house by accident. She inherited proof that she had been seen, even when she thought she hadn't. That changed how I stood in my own life. Quieter, straighter, less willing to shrink. I locked the door and stood there for a moment, listening to the stillness I'd earned. If this story stayed with you, you're welcome to sit with it a little longer. We step back here, leaving Marissa in the space she finally gets to call her own.